Now, I'm just going to say that just the moment I brought the three of you out, I actually noticed our crowd size double. So it must be something. If I were a consulting firm, I'd say, man, this is what sells. This is what sells, you know, smart, attractive women. And so I think the best way, because I think everybody tells their story in their own words best, we're going to go down the line and we're going to start with Galen, who I've known out of this group the longest.
Yes, well, yeah, we've known each other longer than we're going to admit. But yeah, so thank you. So I'm so excited to be here at EarthX and speaking on this panel with these amazing ladies and Richard, especially with and celebrating the Explorers Club and all that the Explorers Club has accomplished. So there's a photo of me with a sperm whale. Right now I work on sperm whales. But now a while ago I started a company. I'm an academic scientist, and I started a company called Global Ocean Exploration because I felt that scientists were being underserved by media. We were hearing all these crazy gloom and doom questions in the world, and it was getting really depressing being a scientist. So I embarked to tell these unknown science stories. What were scientists doing to understand all of the problems facing our planet? Climate change, ocean acidification, overfishing, you know, the destruction of corals, all of that. So it's been a really incredible career journey where I have gone everywhere from the Arctic, Antarctic, all points in between, really looking at global problems and then using all of my wider breadth of knowledge from all the different expeditions to really come to a synthesis to understand how important community is, exploration is, and really telling people what's actually happening on the planet. And right now I'm working on sperm whales, which has been absolutely incredible for so many reasons. I'm sure we'll get into that more.
Well, I mean, I'm just curious, anybody else here ever go swimming with sperm whales?
Well,
no?
I see one person.
All right, there we go.
There's a few, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody
Awesome.
swim with a whale? Wow, okay, there we go. Good to know your audience, right?
Yeah,
and you
absolutely.
can know them name by name, actually.
A few of them I know, yeah.
Amazing. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dr. Shelby Thomas. I am a PhD in conservation genetics with the University of Florida in fisheries and aquatic science. It's been a pleasure to have my restoration career in seagrass, scallops, mangroves, oysters, and my personal favorite, coral reefs. I grew up in Florida and growing up on the third largest reef in the world, thriving with life, underwater cities. And within my lifetime, I've seen the degradation of those reef systems. Over 90% of our stony reef building corals have been degraded and impacted. And that really was a moment of shifting my whole career to restoration and conservation of these ecosystems. And so I'm proud to be a voice for the ocean and founded Ocean Rescue Alliance International, where we're dedicated to using today's technologies for nature and for the good of humanity. And everything from using genotypes and genetics to make more informed decisions for nature to structurally being nature's engineering arm. We take pride in building infrastructure that can help rebuild our natural ecosystems while helping strategically place them in areas where they can thrive. And so we can actually co-create with nature as nature's engineering arm to rebuild coral, oyster, mangroves, and really scale these systems. But one of the fun things we get to do is also connect people to the ocean. In my scientific career, I had realized I could spend my whole entire life doing impactful restoration projects, but until we shift people's relationship with the environment, we won't create a sustained change. And so we use art as a tool for connection to tell stories, submerging sculptures in the ocean that can invite curiosity to explore the ocean and come and see the beautiful life that exists beneath it, the discoveries to be made. And we've deployed 65 sculptures, but more proudly, we've deployed 500 structures that help support fisheries habitat, creating homes for fish, scaling coral restoration, and novel genetics, doing assisted migration, moving corals northward, and really getting the opportunity to create accessibility to the ocean and protecting our coastlines. So excited to dive deeper with you guys. And one parting thing is I want to encourage each of you have a gift and an opportunity to be a voice for something you care about in nature. And I hope that you do that.
Thank you, Shelby. Do you use that term "dive deeper"? Is that, yeah, that was you know, you got to go with some of the tricks. That's right. You got to go with the metaphors, right? Dive deeper. Sarita?
Hi, my name is Dr. Serena McCalla. I am a scientist who works with young minds. And I think that one of the most challenging things to do is to show adults that high school age students can do high level impact research. I started off my career actually not wanting to go into education, but I found that you can be inspired by young people, and their inspiration led me to conducting research with high school age students. In the photos there, we became the most winningest group of students in the world, where we went to international competitions and they did STEM research and presented their research to PhDs in the field, and they won top prizes. We were recognized by Disney and National Geographic, and there's a movie called Science Fair, and then the series called Science Fair, the series, that follows some of my students to the Regeneron Science Talent Search. We do STEM research in any field of science. My background, strongest in genetics, but the students do environmental sciences research. They follow bee migration. They do astrophysics. They do research in any field of science where we can identify a mentor that's willing to work with them. We used to run in an in-person lab, but then during COVID, that shut down, and my company shifted to only bioinformatics, machine learning, and AI research, but we're still finding novel findings. For example, I have a young lady right now who's studying why aggressive breast cancers, we identified a gene that could potentially be targeted to limit aggressive breast cancer spread and death associated with aggressive breast cancers. And this is just from using some open data. So I believe that high school students, well, I don't know if people would agree with me, but I believe high school students can do high-level research at the level of undergrads and even some graduate students, and really find successful findings that will change how we look at the world and how we look at medicine and other things. And that's kind of what I do. And I'm also an EC50 member, 2025.
You know, it's interesting when, an EC50 person, right? You know, it's interesting because we have to, when we look at science, we're looking beyond just traditional ways. I mentioned Amanda Gorman in the beginning was the inspiration. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I actually nominated her to be part of that EC50, and she didn't get selected. So that was my inspiration, yet she actually didn't get selected for the program. Who knows why, right? But Serena, I'm gonna start with you because I think that, again, just to make it clear, you were at a school district, Jericho, which is on Long Island. You're from Long Island, right? Yeah, we're all Long Island. So during the coffee break, we're gonna get out of here and we're gonna drink some coffee, right? We'll try to keep it, people from Texas can understand what we say. But in Jericho, you went into a school district that wasn't necessarily successful. And what I have found with academics is that even though they are bastions of what they would say liberal or forward thinking, they tend to be some of the most conservative institutions because we've done it this way for 200 years, this is how we're gonna do it. So just take us through, you identified the problem, the school wasn't doing well. How do you do it? Because there's gotta be people say, you know, just teach your course. Yeah, just give us a little, and then I'm gonna ask some of the obstacles, because it's easy to read somebody's bio and say, wow, you know, they're a big success, but you don't start as a big success.
100% agree. I remember when I first started at Jericho, they asked me, what do I want on my phone message? And I said, oh, put my name, Serena McCalla, Dr. Serena McCalla. And they were like, well, we're not sure if you're gonna stay. And then I ended up having the school become one of the largest, you know, science hubs in the United States. So I think it started off because they just assumed high school kids were not able to work to the caliber that they're able to work at, and why I think my students were successful at Jericho and now at iResearch.
But again, Serena, your district, Long Island has many districts, was not a successful district.
Not successful in research. Of course, it's a very affluent school district in Long Island, so they have resources. I mean, our annual budget is probably bigger than most medium-sized businesses, but they weren't successful in science research because I think they lacked, they didn't listen, if I'm being honest. I believe when I came into the school district, I was very disruptive. I allowed the students to lead the classroom. I said to them, what do you want to do and why? And that became like the theme every year when I started with a new group of students. Why are you here? What do you want to know? Why do you want to know it? And when you get students engaged in themselves, anything is possible. They showed the world, in essence, because it is international that we do these competitions, that with a little bit of passion and a lot of grit, they could literally change a school district that did not have a theme of science into a school district that's predominantly known now for science and research. So I think it started with passion and grit.
Shelby, I have a question. I mentioned that I met somebody from the White House who said, if the White House could grant you one wish, what would it be? Going with the theme of being for something and not against something, what would you be for them to be for?
I would say in the light of especially the world today is unity, right? And that's still diversity of thought. I think the world is so polar right now. And I think the inspiring thing about some of all the work that we do, and also just that inspiring talk from Bob Ballard, is curiosity and how that ties into exploration and curiosity for humanity and your why and why we're all here, right? I think going into DC and getting to grant a wish would be, let's sit down and really understand we all want the same thing, but we are viewing it from getting it from different perspectives. And if we can really help honor, how can we move forward together, right? And I know I've given this analogy, everyone's thirsty for something, and when you're thirsty, you need water, liquid. And most people are providing that as steam, and it's hot and steamy and aggressive, or as ice and it's cold and closed off. And those are both ways that you can't receive it. And so whether or not you agree with the person next to you, the goal is to figure out how do we move forward, right? We come into this world with nothing, we leave with nothing. And I think the goal is to build things together that can hopefully leave the world a better place and help each other and the planet in the process. And so I think the more that we can actually unify that diversity of thought, that different perspective, we have talks all week coming from technology to education to humanitarian efforts to energy. We have some of the most brilliant minds, the most amazing technologies on the planet right now. There's no reason why we couldn't be making clean energy out of our oceans, out of really being able to work in unity with nature. So I am hopeful, but we need to get back to unity. So that would be what I wish for.
Galen, I spoke about having a ride with an Uber driver who, young guy, very nice, and the reason I mention it, it happens with actually a lot of frequency. So how do you get through to somebody who you feel like, I have a t-shirt that says science doesn't care what your beliefs are. And so all of us have had this conversation with somebody, they're just gonna shrug their shoulders. So I know that in your work and even some of the obstacles you've had becoming who you are, you've run into this a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges, and it sort of does build on what Shelby said as well, but it really is, how do we reach audiences beyond who we are in this room, right? We all care, but how do you reach the Uber driver who's trying to make ends meet? Or honestly, how did I reach my grandfather? My grandfather was not somebody who cared about the environment. He cared about the bottom line. He was a child of the Depression, so it was very different for him. And I think that, what I showed was, first, I tried to impart how amazing our planet is when we're talking about, just and what not even what we've lost, but it's what we have, right? There's a sense of hope that's really important. But I do think it's not coming at people in a pedantic way. It's about coming to where their level is and saying, well, what are you interested in? Using that as an entry point And I frequently do that. I often, in the conservation world, especially a while ago, I fish a lot. And I love to go fishing. And I've had this conversation with Sylvia.
You've had this with me.
I've had it with you. I've had it with Sylvia.
She's very good at fishing, and I'd always say to her, yeah, and leave some fish in the ocean for the rest of
So, and we do a lot of catch and release, and all of my graduate work was on bluefin tuna and tagging bluefin tuna. So we were actually catching them, putting, satellite tags on them to find out where they go so that we can put them back in the ocean, keep them in the ocean for years to come, which is amazing. And we've actually seen a huge success story from that work because yes, we were catching them, but then now but they were going extinct and now they're, the populations are rebounding. We're seeing bluefin from the beach. But really it's about, so if I'm talking about fishing and I want people to care about fish, then I have an audience that otherwise would just maybe want to put what they call meat in the box. But I'm hoping to pivot that into their appreciation of keeping them in the ocean. But I'm not coming at them and saying, never eat a fish. I'm coming at them and saying, take what you need and leave the rest because we need it, and this is why. So it's just about getting it on that same playing field and not really, getting on a soapbox and saying yes to something and no to the other. And on that same note, it really works with everything, right? It's like one of the speakers yesterday really put it in an interesting way when we're talking about even energy. We're saying, it doesn't have to necessarily right this second be one or the other. We're transitioning, we're learning, but all of the technologies can fit together because, in the Industrial Revolution, we were killing whales for oil and energy. And then as we've learned through science and exploration how incredible whales are, fortunately, someone was exploring and found oil, and that's why we have whales left in the ocean. So now we need to sort of think about that as we're pivoting moving forward.
But I'm thinking about your grandfather, because this is something, honestly, as somebody you love, whether it, again, let's stay into science and not necessarily politics, but you can make all the points that are 100%, at least in your mind, 100% right, but yet you can tell it's still going like that. So what is, and I'm gonna ask both of you the same question, not about her grandfather.
No.
We'll all gang up on your grandfather.
That's fine.
Yeah, let's go.
He's not here with us
What's his name? Oh, he's not here, so.
No, but
one less person to convince.
But the beautiful part about that, he was 97 when he passed, but it took a very long career of mine and many conversations and many arguments. But right before he passed, he actually got it. Like you saw the light bulb go off. And I don't know exactly what, maybe it was just my constant, incessant, nagging of him about it or just throwing facts at him, throwing, whatever we could to get it through to him. And he never told me what that moment was, but I never stopped. I never and he loved the ocean. He was a waterman. He loved everything in nature. So it never made sense to me that he still wanted to extract. But,
some campaigns did work. I mentioned that I was at the first Earth Day, and it was at St. James Elementary School, and we went to the railroad tracks and we picked up trash. At that time, there really was a real problem with people driving or wherever they were going. They just tossed things out the window. And I remember kids, and it was around the same time of the first anti-smoking campaigns, and they seemed to work. But Shelby, I've also mentioned this disbelief in science. Where did we start veering off, and why, and how do we change this?
I'm just going to speak briefly back to Gail's
her grandfather
moment, right? And the thing is, everyone has a moment, right? One of my moments that shifted my whole life and career was I initially was studying secondary metabolites from corals, defense chemicals that can be used for medicine. Our ocean has the most highly evolved organisms on the planet. A majority, we have no clue what's out there. Explored only 7%. So much to discover that can help humanity and technology. And watching a mountainous star coral colony that's endangered, over 100 years old, bigger than a dining room table, die in just 3 days from a disease that was like leprosy, taking over the reef tract like wildfire, wasn't on the news. Shifted my whole career to helping protect and be a voice for the ocean. And while that was my moment, there's nothing that I can talk till I'm blue in the face about coral in the ocean, so we can chat more about science. But I think the biggest opportunity is to provide an invitation and a moment for other people that might not get it, because they also might not have had the opportunity to experience that. And so when I have people of differing beliefs, and even, for example, we did a project with a fairly conservative city who just wanted us to do sculptures. And I said, well, that's not what we do, but let me show you why. Come out and dive with me. I want you to see them. They see the habitat structures that provide the homes to the fish, abundance on those reefs versus the sculptures, and you become the scientist. You get the opportunity to be immersed and see the difference for yourself. Fast forward, we've done 4 projects with that city. They're the biggest advocate for our projects, and when we went to our second project, they wanted to double the habitat structures. Not only that, they were the first city to ever fund coral restoration of $80,000. And that was such a proud moment for me in the sense of being able to see that moment of connection. And I think when we have political parties or wherever you sit, whoever you disagree with, give them an opportunity to experience it. Don't go scream at them. Don't need to throw all the science and the facts. Yes, let's educate people. Let's bring awareness. But give an opportunity for connection. Give an opportunity for them to have a moment. And that's what will change their
Shelby,
hearts.
not to be a contrarian, but again, a few of you grew up before we had cell phones. And for us as children, it was boring to be inside, right? You know, being inside meant you were punished, opposed to just going out and experiencing the world, you know, we're going against. So the idea of, I remember I was on speaking of whales, I was on a trip to Antarctica, and there were almost 100 whales in this area. The whale biologist started crying because he had been so impressed. There were some kids who didn't get off their electronic devices to literally walk from here to where the lectern is. And so that's not an easy problem to overcome. Serena, I know you, because you deal with kids a lot more than maybe all of us.
And I kind of
What do
force
you
them
see
to
as
stay
the
on the computer
future?
all day. All of our research is bioinformatics and AI. So I
But
wanted to go
but
back to
AI can be used. It's, you know, you can't, the genie is out of the bottle. How do you make us smarter and more engaged?
I think that one, I think you have to train them from young. I think one of the biggest issues we have is that biases are taught, and if we really hone in on, okay, what do you need versus what do you need? How do we both benefit? How can we take your need and my need and make a common ground? And I think that we fail at that a lot. If we just ask the right questions, you know, why is this important to you? How is this going to change you, your family, your life? And okay, what do you think is important? How is that going to affect? How do we work together to make sure that both needs are met? And then I think a lot of problems would be solved, specifically if we started that earlier on. The younger that young minds are exposed to science and technology, my personal opinion, the better, but right, in the right way. Show them the harms, the benefits, show them all of it. I think that we're growing up in an age where nothing is hidden. So why are we trying to hide anything from these kids? They're going to be able to look it up, and trust me, they are smart. I'm seeing 2-year-olds being able to manipulate iPads to get to, you know, whatever cartoon they want to see. So if a 2-year-old can do it, it's never too young to start telling them the pros and cons of what they're doing. I don't believe taking phones and iPads and laptops away from kids is the only way to teach them that maybe this isn't where they should spend the majority of their time. I highly believe that going outside and seeing nature, going in the ocean, going in the rainforest, experiencing the world is important. But that doesn't mean that we have to totally negate all of the technologies that we've learned. This is where the world is growing. In 18 months, I believe, a lot of the jobs that people think are stable jobs are gone. What are we telling the kids? Don't touch the computer? Why? They're going to need to know how to use it. That's where they're going to be able to make their bread and butter. So I feel like we need to have a commonality and just discuss, what are your needs? What do you want? Why do you want it? And then figure out where the common ground is. And if we do that well, starting with the youngest of the young, I don't think the society is doomed, or, you know, we're going to struggle through the rest of the millennia. I don't believe it. I think the problem is it is polar. This is no good or this is very good. We have to find a commonality.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of commonality or even a common thought, I mentioned, I don't know if you heard me when I was talking about the EC50 or people that you identify. I mentioned J.R. Harris. I don't know if you know J.R., you're shaking your head. J.R. said to me that if you don't see somebody like yourself, you tend not to do it.
Yep.
And I also know in a recent poll that 95% of Americans cannot name not one famous scientist or explorer. Not one. Jane Goodall just passed. And so how important is it for them to see somebody who maybe looks like them or looks different?
I remember when I became a National Geographic Explorer, one of the bio lines they asked us is, who was your role model growing up in science?
Yeah, who was your role model?
I had no answer. I'm being honest. I grew up in an environment where science was kind of not what everybody else was doing. So I had a passion for the planet. Like, I just loved geckos and grass, and I wanted to know more about what was going on in the world. So I kind of just figured it out on my own. My dad used to always ask me, if I asked my dad a question, he would ask me a question back. He would never answer me. And I kind of trained my students the same way, and it really works, because he forced me to start learning about the world on my own. So I would say my dad maybe was my role model because he forced me to jump in. But that is true. What you said is 100% accurate. If it was really hard for me to become a genetic scientist when I knew no one who did genetics. My entire life, I thought a scientist meant physician. No. You know, it wasn't until I got to college where I started seeing, wow, you can do, marine science, you can do biological sciences, earth sciences, chemical sciences. Who knew? I thought I loved science and I loved the world, so I was going into medicine. And I became the narrator of my fate, because I started now saying, okay, maybe I need to do an internship. Maybe I need to go to a university and learn more. If you don't have someone walking you through, that path is hard. And it's tenuous, and sometimes you want to give up. And thank goodness I had a couple of friends that were like, nope, don't do that. Keep fighting the good fight, figure out what it is that you want to do. And by chance, I worked in a laboratory, and that's probably why I started my company. I worked in a laboratory with Dr. George Perry. He was doing Alzheimer's research. And I saw, wow, this is amazing. He may be able to cure this disease that ails so many people. And then I became really interested in just what the things behind the microscope, the things in the PCR and Western blots, and why those were important. He shifted my thought process, but it was because I wanted to know more. If you don't have someone walking you through that, it's really difficult.
Shelby, do you feel at any point growing up there was that aha moment? You know, at some point you saw somebody or met somebody and you thought, wow, I want to be like them. I know, has Dr. Sylvia Earle spoken yet?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah.
She already did speak. People always go up to Sylvia and they say, I want to be just like you are. And she always says the same thing. If you hang around the action long enough, you become part of the action. Shelby, was there anybody growing up that you thought, wow?
You know, as much as I have so much respect for so many of our leaders, I love Sylvia dearly. And, I've reflected, and people always ask, who's your hero or who's your role model? And, to be frank, I honestly haven't really viewed things in a light that way of more like the pedestal approach. I think there's so much uniqueness and tenacity and diversity of people, and I have so much respect for all the achievements people have done. And I think the part for me, it's like this infinite discovery of yourself, and it stems from curiosity, right? Of doing and exploring things you're passionate about that ignites you, and I've always really led by that, and I'm fortunate, at a young age, I had really hard experiences that completely shifted my perspective to really be as driven and dedicated as I am, and having gratitude for the smallest things. And so I learned at a young age we're not promised time and that you might as well do what you love. And I've just always been in that pursuit and have shifted quite a bit. And even as you shared, started out medicine, I really wanted to help people, but I loved the ocean. It made me so excited. I wanted to explore it and just didn't know how to bridge that gap. And that was really just starting from the technologies. And so I got to really honor and look at so many different individuals and ask questions and really build up to lead with that passion and curiosity. And I'd say that's been really how I've been able to come to this path now, and always encourage people to take a moment to just actually sit with yourself and see what you care about, what excites you, like what gets you out of bed at 5 a.m. or to go do something, right? And I think
Me at 5 a.m., I wish I could sleep later, but as you get older, you have to get up. And what gets me up at 5 a.m. is not what I want to get up for.
But I think something we all share is, right, this immense like curiosity and for exploration, right? It's like being a kid, like we didn't lose that. And I think there's so many people in the world today that, we kind of lose that as you get older. And I think that's something that I really love to cultivate and also help with other people in terms of mentorship. And I think mentors are incredibly important.
Absolutely.
And I'm thankful I grew up with horses and had a brilliant instructor that really built a lot of my mindset and a lot of what I was sharing. So, but I think it's all balance. And back to education, I mean, we're able to bring science and technology and experiences in nature all together, and we need that balance now today.
Galen, I know you have supportive parents because I've met your parents and they are so proud of you. But, I know we have a high schooler there. And again, being a scientist, being an explorer is not this kind of line. It's very choppy, it's lonely, it's frustrating. So looking back at the high school Galen, who was, I'm sure, a fun person, but what advice would you give, and really, how would you have navigated it differently, maybe the same?
Yeah, for me, I knew from a very young age that the ocean was my calling. I can't think of a moment in my life where it wasn't my calling. It wasn't what really sparked my curiosity. So for me in high school, I grew up in New York City. So growing up in Manhattan, which is an island, and I would be staring out at the East River, which is a tidal strait, so it's called a river, but it was so fascinating to watch. I would watch the currents and all of that, and all of my friends thought I was nuts. I mean, I grew up in New York City. They did not care about the ocean.
You could have been nuts. It could have been nuts, but.
Oh, I think as Bob Ballard actually said in his, he's like, yeah, everybody called me nuts. I was like, well, I could kind of relate to that because certainly in my closed world of New York City it was, but I was really fortunate to have parents who sparked that curiosity. And I think in high school, my high school was not focused on science at all. It was all about art and English and history. So what I did was I dove into, well, how did history and art and all the different cultures look at the ocean? And so I built a historical perspective of culture towards the ocean, and that sort of fueled what I could look at in my own exploration of the ocean. And so for me, it was really pursuing in high school any opportunity that I had to get in the ocean, on the ocean, read whatever books. I studied so many maps and currents, and what could I arm myself with knowledge for the ocean or the earth or the environment or climate or whatever sparks that curiosity that gets you up in the morning and that you just want to know the next thing, right? And that's what's so exciting. And there are so many amazing resources, and there's more now because of technology. I mean, I can't even imagine what I would have done if there was like Google and GIS and Google Earth, and I would be sitting at a computer a lot more than I did because I just had a globe and I had my atlas and I had all of these incredible resources that were so tangible. But I think I don't know that I would have done anything differently, but I think it was always sort of looking beyond and talking to whomever I could. And then fortunately, when I moved back to New York, the Explorers Club came into my life. And I got to meet my childhood heroes that I had, read about. I never thought that I would be friends with Don Walsh, who was the first to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, And then I have silly pictures of us like in an elevator, making faces at a mirror. I'm like, this was my hero from the time I was 5 years old and heard about that first exploration. So you never know what's gonna like spark that curiosity. And I was helping my brother with a project when I learned about Dawn. And and so I just think there's really not much more to do other than to pursue whatever you're passionate about. And if it's exploration, awesome, come talk to us, we'll give you tools. And then, and then beyond that, it's really just pursuing that, and then everything does fall into place. There will always be hurdles, but as long as you know that there's nothing else you can do the following morning in your life, then exploration and science is for you, because there's so many struggles, but it's so worth it. Like, I can't imagine waking up tomorrow morning and being like, I'm not doing this. I'm going to an office and I'm gonna sit there and like look at a spreadsheet. And I look at spreadsheets a lot, but I'm looking at cool data and I'm like making some sort of really awesome discovery that excites me. And I have friends who do that in the banking world, and like, good for them, but like, I would not be into that. I would much rather, have the opportunity to get in the water swimming next to the largest creature on the planet and look in their eyes and have that like intense moment, of shared curiosity about each other, which I'm so privileged to have had and get to do in my job.
It's so funny you mentioned you can't think of doing anything else. Often I will take people who are very wealthy on trips. We've all done that. And especially when I was filming stuff, my TV series for ABC, I'd have these guys who are literally billionaires going, man, I would love to trade jobs and do what you do. And I'm always like, dude, you can do what I do, actually, and do it in comfort. So, Serena, we're at EarthX, and honestly, I applaud this as being a solution place, a place that people get together. And I know it's important that even among our own circle, but if you could sort of do the crystal ball or the blue sky for EarthX and for Earth Day, right? What would that be sort of going forward? What is it that you want people or the messaging to be? That's a tough one because, Earth Day, I have to admit, it doesn't have the same significance as when I first heard about it as a kid, because I feel like I live Earth Day every day. But it's a day in which we hope the public takes notice and thinks about something. So,
Did you notice the astronauts from Artemis continually said, look at the beauty of the Earth? Mm-hmm. I will never forget that became the resonating theme for these astronauts. You're literally doing something that no one else has done. You're flying behind the moon, and your storytelling consisted of how beautiful the Earth was. If there's anything we can take away from that, is that clearly the Earth is a magnificent place and we should appreciate it. Because that literally is the largest takeaway I took from that expedition, was that these astronauts who are now going further in the universe than anyone else has gone, kept speaking about how beautiful the planet was. And I think that the planet is beautiful in so many ways, in the smallest ways. I look at genetic code all day, every day. And you can't see genetic code, but even that smallest piece of who we are as human beings, we all resonate from this one place, this one Earth, this one beautiful sphere, and we should look at it as a gift every day. It's so funny, Gayla, when you just said, I wake up every day and I'm so happy to do what I do. I love talking to young people who are gonna take the charge after I'm gone, doing these fantastical things, doing the research that I probably didn't even imagine, because I used to just work in a web bench. In the last 5 years, I learned how to code. And now I spend my day doing that. They're going to see the world so differently in the next 20 years. And I'm thankful that I actually have a part of that. Like I'm able to see it and to share my joy with them, and that they're able to share their joy with me. I feel like we have a lot of promise. I know that a lot of our daily days have been dark and tumultuous and stressful, I think. But I think that we have so much to look forward to if we just start letting the young people lead, I think that they will correct a lot of the problems that we've caused them. I think that they don't just live in doom and gloom, and that we should trust that they are gonna be okay. And if we let them kind of run and figure things out, that the earth is going to be the place that we all look at it as a magnificent place to be.
Yeah, I mean, really well said. Almost every astronaut that I've met that's circled the globe, and Galen's shaking her head because she's met some of these people, all to say the same thing. It's called the overview effect, that you look down, you don't see borders, and you realize that every person that's ever existed is right there. And it's to a T almost an overwhelming effect. I'd like to thank our panelists. Honestly, I'm so proud that the faces that we're seeing in exploration, who gets to tell the story, is constantly evolving. And I think the optimism that I take away from that is that we need to represent the fabric of global humanity if we're going to have any hope. So thank you so much. You're all wonderful advocates for the planet. And thank you for being such a good audience. Such a good audience. Give yourselves a round of applause. Okay, I got one of these. All right, well, thank you very much. We are out of time, so thank you, ladies.